I'm Mark Golub, and in the news, a horrendous day in Charlottesville, which has captured the nation's attention. It was an ugly, ugly day for America. It was not only a day dripping in the most vile expressions of hate and bigotry, it turned into a day of violence and injury and even of death, as a hate-filled lunatic purposely drove a car into a crowd of counter-protesters in a scene reminiscent of those we've witnessed coming out of Europe and out of Israel, where Muslims and Palestinians committed wanted murder using cars and buses and trucks. I know there's a movement to call this act of murder domestic terrorism. I speak only for myself, only for myself. I believe drawing this equation reflects a serious misunderstanding of what terrorism is. Terrorism is a tool used by a group of people who are seeking to intimidate and even destroy a society. To the best of my knowledge, the person who drove his car into a crowd of people was not implementing any group policy. Every violent act of hatred is not terrorism. And to see it as such is to mitigate the evil that is manifest in terrorism that would cause a 9/11 or would result in a Charlie Hebdo or a Palestinian slitting the throat of a baby in his crib. But this act is a horrific crime of murder. And at least one member of the white supremacist neo-Nazi mob that gathered in Charlottesville was willing to commit murder out of a deranged hatred. And these vile, hate-filled traitors to every value and ethic of American society were also unabashed at times in their expressions of anti-Semitism. And the anti-Semitic dimension of the white supremacists has been extremely upsetting to many American Jews. And it raises a question. Does the anti-Semitism expressed at this white supremacist rally in Charlottesville represent anything larger, anything significant about America as a whole? One JBS viewer expressed his feelings in an email to me. He said, "I've been expressing my concerns about the Nazism in the USA for a long time and experiencing a real hard time talking about it with many people and friends. Since nobody wants to acknowledge the fact that such a despicable phenomenon exists in America, I'm willing to estimate the same denial as practiced by the Germans in the 1930s is also present in our nation. After reading for all my life about the Nazi period, and after living 20 years in the USA, where my family is living today and where I am a citizen, I can assure you that the American's mentality is very similar to the one that developed in Hitler's Germany, the most civilized and techno-powerful nation at the time." This viewer email reflects the thinking, rightly or wrongly, of many Americans. For myself, I believe there's a chasm of difference between the Germany of the 1930s and America of today. But that's my conviction. And there are those in the Jewish community who are making this rally and the hate spewing from it all about Donald Trump. And many Americans were disheartened by the president's failure to specifically condemn the white racists, the KKK, and neo-Nazis. And President Trump's referring to hate and violence coming from all sides strengthened those who have argued the president is playing to white supremacists who see him as an ally in the White House, whom Donald Trump does not wish to offend. Of course, therefore, receiving vociferous criticism from the media, from members of Congress, including congressional Republicans, and from organizations throughout the country, including many Jewish organizations, the president issued another statement in which he did expressly and explicitly call out the KKK, neo-Nazis, and white supremacists as criminals and thugs who are repugnant to everything we hold dear as Americans. To those who hate Trump, and there are many in the Jewish community who despise the president, this statement came too late. And one thing is beyond question. Charlottesville was a dark, ugly day in America. Well, one journalist who was at the rally in Charlottesville is the Washington Bureau Chief of the JTA, the Jewish Telegraphic Agency, Ron Kampeas. And Ron joins us on our JBS phones now to bring us a first-hand account of the day. Ron, thank you for joining us once again.
Thanks for having me.
Ron, you were there. What was it like?
Well, like you said, it was ugly. It was estimated to be the largest white supremacist demonstration in years. I was at one in Memphis in 2013 that was prompted by exactly the same cause. The city of Memphis was bringing down some Confederate statues, and maybe 75 people turned up, and they were like, well-behaved, people with terrible, hateful ideas, but well-behaved middle-aged men and women that weren't trying to provoke anyone. This was a much younger crowd, a much larger crowd, and as we saw, a more violent crowd, and one that was really disposed to hurling all kinds of invective at passersby. I was the brunt of some anti-Semitic comment. I heard them screaming epithets at black people. It was an ugly day.
You actually experienced anti-Semitism, yes?
That's right. I was trying to approach a group of the protesters just to talk with them, and I was stopped in my tracks by one of them who said, "How's it going, Shlomo?" or something like that. So sort of picking out somebody who looks Jewish and calling him a Shlomo. It was, in the moment, it just strikes you as absurd and stupid. But once you contemplate on it, you see, you understand the visceral anti-Semitism that's going on there, the hostility. Because I've dealt with some of these people in the past, some of their leaders when they're in Washington, and they're perfectly willing to talk to Jewish or non-Jewish journalists. They don't display their animosity there. But here you were with, it was a kind of a feral, a crowd. It was out there and it was real.
Mm-hmm. Ron, there are those who say that the white supremacists represent but a fraction of the American people. And while it's upsetting, the event does not say anything larger or significant about the sentiments of the American people. What's your sense of that, not only in general, but as you experience the day?
Well, I think there's two things. I think the mayor of Charlottesville, Michael Zigner, who's Jewish, liberal Jewish Democrat, he said that not after yesterday, for sure, but like after an earlier demonstration, he said he remained optimistic because his impression of most people is that they buy into the more diverse version of the American dream, and this is kind of a relic, and it's doomed. And I think one of them, just walking towards the demonstration, one of the things I did is I passed a local synagogue, a Reform synagogue, and there was this guy standing outside. I thought he was Jewish, and I just wanted to chat with him. And he said, "No, I'm not Jewish. I'm a Navy retiree, and I come to the synagogue because I like their film festivals, and I'm here. I'm here to stand with them."
That's
and
wonderful.
so there's that America as well.
Yes. By the way,
and so,
when you say there's that America as well, I believe you've defined America, and that it is true. There is an element, and you experienced it firsthand. It's ugly, but I don't believe it
right.
represents America. And that's really what I'm asking you. Do you think, this veteran standing in front of a synagogue is America? Or do you think that there is a real America represented by, incidentally, Ron, how many people do you imagine were part of this white supremacist gathering?
About 500.
About 500.
They came from all over. Yeah, they came from all over the country. As you can see, there are people that were identified coming from as far as the West Coast. But I think you're right. I think that my U.S. Navy retiree is more America certainly than they are. But I do think that as I said, this is the largest manifestation. I think they feel emboldened. They feel that they've tapped into something. There is, and there of course is a darker side of American history having to do with slavery and white supremacy that a lot of people have moved beyond. But that hasn't been maybe 100% dealt with, and that's what they're trying to tap into.
Yes. Ron, this whole thing reminds me of Skokie, Illinois, and you know about it well. Neo-Nazis petitioned the city to march in a neighborhood in which a large number, the majority of residents, were Holocaust survivors. And that was the reason why the neo-Nazi group chose this particular neighborhood in Skokie. The Supreme Court of Illinois upheld the right of neo-Nazis to march in Skokie. And in the end, that's exactly what they did. The event came and went virtually without incident, without national attention, never to be heard from again, except every now and then I make reference to it. Was there any element that more of this was made of than was necessary? If anti-protesters had ignored it, stayed away, would this event have come and gone? 500, by the way, 500 on the one hand, that's a nice-sized group. It's nowhere near the kind of groups that other causes generate when they have rallies. Would this have come and gone without incident and be soon forgotten?
Maybe not. These guys, when they came on Friday night, they started marching with their tiki torches, the white supremacists, that is. They were looking to provoke something. And so, yes, I know that obviously having counter-protesters is something that these guys want, but they were there looking for a fight. They came. I mean, they came. Some of them were armed. Some of them were dressed like in militiamen type outfits, all black, carrying plastic shields. They were looking for a fight, and they found one.
I understand. Okay, you also talk to the Jewish community all over the country. You're plugged in. What do you feel now has been the response of the Jewish community? Do you feel that there is, I'm asking you, is there an overreaction here, or is the Jewish community, in your view, putting this in a proper perspective? How frightened are you now that neo-Nazism is going to in any way be a significant element of American society, which the American Jewish community now must make a big deal about?
I don't think it's going to be a significant part of American society. I think that we're maybe more aware of the degree to which it can move people to violence, and that there is a strata of society, however small the percentage is, that is receptive to the violence that it embraces, and that will go out there and do things. Just like we have to be aware of how certain strains of radical Islam influence people. We have to be aware of how certain radical white ideologies influence people. The alleged assailant on Saturday was besotted with Nazism and with Hitler. And so it's just something that we have to be on the lookout for. I don't think that America is on its way to being Nazi by any means, but there is a domestic threat that people should be aware of, we should be educated about.
Ron, as always, I thank you so much for giving us this time and sharing your perspective. And just keep up the excellent work, and I'll continue to chase you, and we'll be in touch often.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. The thoughts of Ron Kampeas, Washington Bureau Chief of the JTA, the Jewish Telegraphic Agency. And Ron, as you heard, was actually in Charlottesville over this past weekend. As we said earlier, there are those who blame the very presence of a white supremacist rally on President Donald Trump, arguing that it is the president who subtly courts white supremacists as those who helped him win election. And the president received serious criticism for failing to condemn the KKK, neo-Nazis, and white supremacists, arguably for fear of losing their favor and their vote. Well, to speak to this charge, I'm now pleased to have on our JBS phones the founding president of SaveTheWest.com and a supporter of Donald Trump, Ken Abramowitz. Ken, thank you so much for joining us.
Sure, it's a pleasure to be with you today.
Thank you. So, Ken, what would you say to those American Jews who argue Donald Trump is responsible for creating a climate of hate in America, which has emboldened white supremacists and led to the public rally in Charlottesville?
Well, I think the analysis is okay. They just got the wrong president. President Obama was the president of hate and divisiveness and racism, and President Trump inherited 8 years of this. So I'd say that's the key issue. So they have a good thought, but the wrong president.
Okay, I want to make sure I understand you. There are going to be some viewers to JBS who think that, and I say that, I love you, they're going to think that answer is silly. The issue is, to what extent has Donald Trump, in fact, was he supported by white supremacists? When you hear people say they need the votes of those, he needs the votes of those who were at that rally, and therefore he plays to them. Do you think there's any element of truth? And if not, Ken, where is that charge against Donald Trump coming from?
Yeah, well, I don't think it's true. President Trump derived his strength, if you look at the votes, from everybody who didn't live on the East or West Coast. In other words, all the normal people that live in between New York and Washington and California, those normal people basically voted for Trump. So you can't, it wasn't a racial issue. They didn't vote. It wasn't a white-black issue. It was, as he would say, to make America great again, and those people sensed that something was wrong, and they showed up. I think they're misanalyzing Trump's statement that he made a day or two ago about this issue when he said there's a lot of blame on all sides.
Yes.
I think that was a correct statement. To me, there were white racists fighting with black racists. So, but he didn't want to get in. He didn't want to use the word racist. He didn't want to use the word white racist, and he didn't want to use the word black racist. But basically, you had two groups of racists who got into a fight over an issue that shouldn't have been an issue. They had a statue for Robert E. Lee for I don't know however many years. He is an American. Was not a loyal American. He fought against the North. He lost. He lost for the right reasons. We know why he lost. But in his memory, they had a statue. They shouldn't have gotten rid of that statue. So it was the mayor and the city council whoever made the decision to get rid of the statue. That they were getting involved in an issue that was none of their business. And it was this is history. You don't have to rewrite or destroy history. And then when they made that mistake, they then brought out a group of whites who was unhappy, and then a group of blacks who were unhappy. and a police force that was told not to do their job, which was another mistake of the mayor and the city council. So I don't think Trump wanted to get involved in a diagnosis of saying the mayor made a mistake to get rid of the statue. The mayor made a mistake by telling the police not to do anything. The whites, whether you want to call them racist or not, the whites who showed up shouldn't have been so angry, and the blacks, or whether you want to call them racist or not, showed up as a counter-protest, and you had all this mess that was created. I think he didn't want to inflame the situation by calling the whites racist and calling the blacks racist and calling the mayor stupid. Mm-hmm. So he just said there's a lot of blame all around, and it's a tragedy and shouldn't have happened. I thought his statements were reasonable and did not indicate any source of racism on his part.
And very interesting. And by the way, it's important that we hear your perspective. You know, throughout the primary process, throughout the election, and you and I spoke during the election process, I maintained what I consider to be a very balanced position here on JBS. And I have not tried to descend into ad hominem criticism of any candidate, including Donald Trump. And I've said over and over again, I care about policy. And do I think that there are times that Donald Trump doesn't comport with the way in which I would be more comfortable? I do. Does that make me think he's a bad president? That's not an issue for me. What's issue is policy, and to what extent is any candidate, including Donald Trump, schooled enough to be qualified, and once he gets into office, how quick does he learn? And my own experience has been that most people who become president haven't a clue of what they're in for. I saw it with Gerald Ford, even though he was vice president. I saw it with Jimmy Carter. I saw it with Bill Clinton. I saw it with Barack Obama. There is a learning curve. There's always a learning curve. And I understand at the same time people are upset that Donald Trump did not go through the learning process prior to becoming president that most presidents have. But that's different than being critical of an ad hominem feature. And it just annoys me that he is picked on in a way that we would never tolerate a Barack Obama being ridiculed or a Hillary Clinton, or it's inappropriate. Having said that, I want you to know that I was uncomfortable that when he made the comment, he blamed both sides. And I understand your point. And I saw violence coming from those who came down to Charlotte to confront the white supremacists. And I understand, from my perspective, there is an element of responsibility, even blame there. However, to avoid explicitly criticizing the KKK by name, avoiding any criticism of neo-Nazis by name, and even of white supremacists in general, but choosing to talk about violence from many sides. I'm telling you, Ken, it disappointed me. And my own experiences, I had people on the phone. I talked for a long time, was in email contact with a friend of mine. Marcy is emailing me about how her rabbi friend is going down to Charlottesville. The rabbi was not going because he was a black racist. He wasn't going because he was a racist at all. This person was going down because, as was she felt the Jewish community had to stand up against the anti-Semitism that would be expressed in Charlottesville. And I feel there is a distinction between the anti-Semitic, virulent, anti-black, racist groups, and even those who may have been wrong to go down there and may have contributed to the mayhem, but I don't criticize them the same way. And so I don't want to hear them lumped together, as people sometimes lump Palestinians and Israelis together. They're both to blame. No, they're not both to blame. And in this situation, Ken, I did not feel there was equal blame, and that I wish the president said initially what he ultimately said today, where he just slammed the KKK, he slammed neo-Nazis, he slammed white supremacists, and I wish he had done it the day before. And then I want to hear what you have to say.
Sure, but look, would you have felt better if Trump said, I analyzed the situation, I came to the conclusion that the mayor and his team were stupid and disrespectful of history to remove the statue of Robert E. Lee, number one. Number two, I'm disappointed in the white racists who overreacted to this stupid decision by the mayor. And number three, I was angry at the black racists who showed up, in particular Black Lives Matter racist organization, who further inflamed the problem, and all three of them are to blame. Now, would you feel better?
No, because it would make it sound like Donald Trump was equating Black Lives Matter with the KKK and neo-Nazis. And although
right.
by the way, I have no sympathy for Black Lives Matter, which is pro-Palestinian against Israel. However, they're not the KKK, they are not neo-Nazis, and what white supremacy means in America, they are not the equivalent of.
No, I disagree.
Okay.
I think Black Lives Matter is a terror organization. They're encouraging the killing of police, both verbally and physically. I think they're every bit as bad as white supremacists.
Okay. I have 1 minute left. I have one more question for you. I've asked this of Ron Kampeas. From your perspective, does the neo-Nazi component of this white supremacist march in any way make you think that it represents something larger or significant about American society today?
Look, I think white supremacism has been disgraced over the years. The government hunted down the KKK. Why they've come back for a revival, I don't know enough, and I'm disappointed to hear that there's no function in life for the KKK. There never was, but there's certainly no function, no reason for them to be revived. So I'm as disappointed as you are. In terms of the question of Jews, by the way, Jews are equal opportunity targets, so to speak, for the white races and the black races, because Jews are just a convenient scapegoat for whatever anyone's angry about. And Jews have nothing to do with this issue. This is a racial issue, and I'm disappointed that in this country that almost got over its racism. Racism was revived by President Obama, and then President Trump got stuck trying to fix the 8 years of racism from President Obama.
Ken, I am always very pleased that you let me call you, that you participate on JBS. There are people who are not going to agree with you. There are people who are. I find you always to be a thoughtful, articulate spokesperson for a perspective that's important for us to hear. And I thank you so much for always giving us some time.
It's always a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you, Ken. Ken Abramowitz, founding president of SaveTheWest.com and a supporter of Donald Trump. And again, he has a perspective. I don't share it, but it's a perspective that people do have. My thanks to our director, Sloan Copeland, JBS Associate Director, Dara Golub, to editors John McDevitt and Cordelia Saporin, and to the producers of this edition of In the News, Carol Lilienthal and Tisha Bader. Until the next time, I'm Mark Golub. Be well, my friends.